Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This video is another video in the series of things narcissistic people say to distract you from the truth. And this video is going to be when a narcissist comes at you with the word fault. And there's several ways a narcissist will use the word fault to pass the blame over to you, to pass the responsibility over to you, to escape taking responsibility for their own actions. The word fault is used by a narcissist to not take responsibility for their behaviour, for their wrongdoings, for their errors, their mistakes. If they've promised something and not delivered, they're not going to take responsibility for not doing that, for not finishing a job. A narcissist uses the word fault so that they don't have to take responsibility for one of their misdeeds, for one of their imperfections, for a failing or a flaw in their character. A narcissist uses the word fault so they can shift the blame for your misfortune or for something that might have been accidental, but they're still going to shift the blame over to somebody else. A narcissist is going to feel criticised in some way. They're going to receive a narcissistic injury if someone points out one of their wrongdoings, or if they are exposed for one of their wrongdoings, one of their character flaws. And we can all make mistakes. We all have those character flaws. It's what most of us learn from, by taking responsibility for our mistakes, by taking ownership of our character flaws, by learning from them, developing, growing and changing along life's journey. Narcissists don't change because they will not be accountable for their own behaviour. They will not take responsibility for their own behaviour. So they don't think they need to change. They think everybody else needs to change. And when they feel like they're being exposed, or they feel like they're getting some form of criticism, this causes narcissistic injury. And when a narcissist receives some form of narcissistic injury, they're going to go on the attack. They're going to go on the defensive. They're going to lie, deny, project, blame, shame, criticise, judge and pass all the responsibility over to somebody else. They may even go as far as to bait somebody, provoke somebody into reacting to them so that they can blame the person who takes responsibility for their behaviour, for their reactions, because the person who's reacted takes ownership of their behaviour, knows they're responsible for their behaviour, and then they're the ones left feeling bad for the things that the narcissist is actually doing to them. When somebody brings the worst out in you, that's not the kind of person you want to be around. That's the kind of person you need to begin to distance yourself from. You don't go out to bring the worst out in others. Narcissistic people bring the worst out in themselves and then blame you for them going there. They will then bring the worst out in you and blame you for going there, because a narcissist never thinks they're to blame. They don't take ownership of their behaviour. They will not be held responsible for their own behaviour, only temporarily if they believe they can exploit somebody some more, and they will always pass the fault over to somebody else. When somebody will never admit to a wrongdoing, when somebody will never admit fault, it causes fractures within a relationship that are constantly getting cemented over and never getting dealt with. So the issues, the problems forever get worse. There's never any closure. And as a narcissist is always causing those fractures, the relationship isn't ever going to get anywhere other than round and round and round in circles, causing you pain. A narcissist will come at you and say, "It's not my fault." By this, a narcissist isn't technically blaming anyone. They're just excusing themselves by saying, "It's not my fault." This is a covert, underhand way of trying to get out of something without going into too much of a debate. So they're hoping that they can say, it's not my fault, and you will just drop the subject and accept that it's not their fault. Although usually because it was their fault, people don't drop the subject. People keep discussing it, and a narcissist doesn't like this. A narcissist saying it's not my fault for something that is definitely their fault shows that they're not willing to be accountable for their behaviour. They're not willing to be responsible for their behaviour. Therefore, they're not going to change that behaviour. And if you was to ask a narcissist whose fault is it then, there are many lines of defence a narcissist can go on, but more often than not, they usually choose one where they pass the blame over to you, where they will come at you and say, if you hadn't, I wouldn't. If they hadn't, I wouldn't. They will find something to excuse their behaviour so they don't have to take responsibility for their behaviour. A narcissist they're a bit like a child that has been told no, they can't have that packet of sweets. So they've gone to get the sweets anyway. Children are extremely persistent, which is a good quality to have in life, so long as they learn to take ownership for their own behaviour. So the child might go and get the sweets anyway, and they can be sat there with the bag in hand, sugar all over their face, eating away quite happily, and you can walk in and say, I told you not to have those sweets. It's not my fault. I didn't hear you. My brother got them for me. My sister got them for me. You said I could have them, don't you remember? You never said I couldn't have them. A child is very creative in finding reasons as to why it's not their fault that they did something that they shouldn't have done. They have to learn to take responsibility for their behaviour. And there is some harsh life lessons, and it's not an easy job raising children. However, at some point, most children grow out of that kind of attitude. Children are very resourceful at trying to get their own way, but they learn that sometimes you have to give that give and take in life. Sometimes you have to accept the word no and redirect yourself onto something different. Narcissistic people don't learn to accept the word no. They don't learn how to accept responsibility for their own behaviour. They just learn how to shift the blame over to somebody else to escape any consequences, which is what a child is doing. They're doing all they can to get their own way. They are learning. They are doing all they can to get their own way and escape any form of consequences for their actions. Narcissists are self-entitled people. They are hypocritical people. They are envious people who lack empathy, who will do all they can to get their own way, and then they will do all they can to escape any consequences for their actions. And more often than not, because they don't believe it's their fault and they blame somebody else, they don't take that responsibility for their own behaviour. So many genuinely believe they're not the one with the problem, often why they call the people the crazy one. There's the overt way, where they will directly just say straight out to you that it's your fault. So even when you know you've not done something wrong, a narcissist can come straight out at you and say to you, that's your fault. Whatever a narcissist has been caught out in, whatever evidence you have, if a narcissist does not want to take responsibility for that behaviour, they are going to say it's your fault. You can catch them cheating on you, which is their fault. That shows their lack of morals, their lack of empathy for how their behaviour will affect you, their lack of accountability for their behaviour, especially when they just turn straight around and say, it's your fault, you didn't pay me enough attention, regardless of the attention you did or did not pay them. Remember, a narcissist is always seeking excessive admiration, so no matter how much attention you give, a cheating narcissist, they're always going to be looking for more. No matter how much attention you give any narcissist, they're always going to be looking for more. So that behaviour is on them. However, they're going to twist it, they're going to turn it, and they're going to find a way to blame you so that they don't have to feel responsible for the things they're doing to you. They can go and spend all the money so that there's no money left for groceries. And that will be your fault for giving them the money rather than their fault for not being adult enough to handle the money in the correct way. And as we all make mistakes in life, we can forgive them because it's the intent behind people's behaviour, and we often don't see the intent behind a narcissist behaviour until we're in a little bit too deep and we find ourselves crawling our way back out. A narcissist saying that's your fault is to confuse you, to get you on the defensive. So when you try to explain to them why it's their fault, they can provoke that argument with you, they can blame you for the argument, they can twist it all onto you, they can provoke you to get that reactive abuse from you, to blame you. They want to distract you. They want to get you on the defensive. They want to get you feeling shamed. They want to get you feeling like you're the one that's to blame, so you're the one that works harder to please them, when in reality they are the one to blame. And by them shifting that blame over to you by saying it's your fault, they're not going to change that behaviour. It's who they are, instinctively or intentionally, is who they are as a person, and they lack the empathy to care. And then there's the fragile victim narcissist that's going to turn it around onto how they're always the poor, woe is me. When they've been caught out on something and they've done something, you might not even ask them about something. Fragile, vulnerable, victim narcissistic people are very good at turning around and saying, oh, I knew it would be my fault, where they're not actually taking responsibility for their behaviour. They're just saying that they knew you would blame them. So they know you're blaming them, but they're not taking responsibility. By saying, I knew it would be my fault, is them claiming they knew you would blame them for the things they've actually done, but they're not going to take responsibility. They're not going to take ownership for that behaviour. They're going to play the victim. They're going to play the woe is me, that you're going on the attack. You're blaming them. You're shaming them. You should feel bad for hurting them, for them doing something they shouldn't have done. A fragile narcissist wants you to feel sorry for them for the things they've done to you. When it comes to narcissistic people, when it comes to toxic people, when it comes to anyone, we can all make mistakes. Often why we forgive people, and it's okay to forgive people. It's okay to not forgive people, whatever it is, where you can move on with your life. Forgiveness is for you. So often you need to forgive yourself for putting up with behaviour that you didn't recognise at the time. When it comes to people make a mistake. So if people can take ownership for that mistake, we can forgive them. Mistakes happen, we can work through it, we can communicate, we can handle it, we can deal with it together in a partnership. If they go on then to repeat that mistake, they didn't learn the first time. Therefore, they're not going to change their behaviour, and they're going to do it again. If you forgive them a second time, there will be a third, a fourth, a fifth time, because they learned when you forgave them the second time that they can get away with it, and often their behaviour gets worse. People who make a mistake, learn from that mistake, and try not to do that mistake again. There's mistakes made where people make several mistakes that hurt themselves, over and over again. And that can take a bit of time to work through. And then there's mistakes where people hurt another person. Genuine people who care about others, who make a genuine mistake that hurts another person, they learn the first time. People who don't care about others will never learn. They just learn how they can get away with it, how they can repeat it. When somebody has done something and they come at you and say it's your fault, we have to recognise that we are not responsible for someone else's behaviour. Their behaviour is not our fault. A narcissist wants to convince us that our emotional reactions to their behaviour is the problem, when without their behaviour there would be no reactions. Therefore, they are the ones causing the problem. They will cause conflict, drama and chaos and then blame everybody else. When two people bring out the worst in each other, they need to find a safe way to go their separate ways. A narcissist will do all they can to provoke you, to get you going, to get those reactions, to blame you. And because you hold yourself responsible, you blame yourself for your reactions, because you take ownership of your behaviour. You will do nothing to a narcissist. A narcissist will do something to you. So you haven't done anything to the narcissist. They will then get you to ask them, question them, or you will ask them and question them about their behaviour. They will go, they will react, and then they will blame you. Either way, with a narcissistic person, they're going to find someone else to blame. They're going to find someone else to shift the blame over to. What you often find is people who have dealt with narcissistic people blame themselves, and it takes a lot of reprogramming that mindset so that, yes, they take responsibility for their own behaviour, but they pass responsibility back to the rightful owner for their behaviour. I shall link this video into the playlist of the things narcissistic people say, because narcissistic people do say an awful lot of things, and we can say it's not our fault when we know we've not done something. So narcissistic people can also say things that everyday phrases that everybody uses, and I shall link that playlist into the description. Thank you very much for listening. Go out there, create the day that you deserve. Remember, you are not responsible for other people's behaviour, or the people's actions, or the people's words. You are only responsible for your own.